Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the franchise guide.
So I first started working out, just making sure that when I took this role, that the sales guys at STG weren't overselling, that they were following the FTC rules and regulations on franchise sales. What really learned franchise law was when one of the partners decided, you know what, there's a void in the marketplace right now in franchising. There's nobody doing indoor cycling. And so we created this concept called Cycle Bar. And my first role as general counsel was to write the franchise disclosure document and franchise agreement. Same documents that I review now,
Right.
I actually had to write. And of course, I didn't write this myself. At the time, we used this law firm out of Chicago, one of the best law firms out there, and they helped me write it. And I needed to know everything about this. I had 100 questions back. How do you come up with a royalty rate? What are the positives and negatives if you do this or that with the territory size? I needed to make sure I knew everything, because at the end of the day, I knew that my name was going to be on this document. It would look pretty bad if a franchisee were to call me up and say, "Hey, Kit, I'm considering buying your franchise. Maybe this is a candidate. I want to know what section 13.4 means." And if I were to say, "Geez, I don't know, let's talk to our lawyers," that would look really bad. So I needed to make sure I understood everything about it. And so then once we got the documents issued, I was taking what I learned and implementing those terms and seeing what works and what doesn't, and then refining it, and each year revising the documents and really understanding this is a living, breathing document that should be changed year to year. It needs to be, obviously. The FTC requires it. But you've got some changes to the system you need to make sure franchisees are aware of. The whole point of the disclosure document is to disclose important information to give buyers a good understanding of what they're buying into before they're locked into a contract.
Right.
So that's how I got started really understanding the franchise agreement and franchise disclosure document. Then we had franchise open operating. It was figuring out what works. And then once the company got bought out, they were about to go public, is when I decided to start my own firm. And since then, I've just been representing franchisees doing FDD reviews. So I've done several hundred in the last year. I'll do more than a few hundred this year. And so I've got experience there, so I can tell you what's normal and what's not. And I think I bring a lot of value when I provide my reviews.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the industry of franchising, it's a business in and of itself. When you're doing the review, you really need someone that has a background in franchising that really understands franchise law, especially when you're not sure, is this normal wording in an FDD, correct?
Absolutely. I get people all the time asking, "Hey, is this normal? Is this not?" I just did a review yesterday. The royalty rate was 40%.
Wow. Never heard of that.
Yeah, but it makes sense for this system. And so I was telling the franchisee, "Look, this is the highest royalty rate I've seen, but it makes sense for this business model."
Right.
And so I'm comparing and looking at all these other business models and seeing what is industry standard. And if there's an outlier, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. The franchisor could be really innovative. They could be doing something a little bit different. And I think that's a great thing if you investigate and dig a little deeper and find out, does this actually work?
I agree. I always, when someone had looked and I think it was over 20%. And I said, well, that's definitely higher than what we normally see. But the better question is not, is this too high? It's, what am I getting for that royalty? You have to make sure it makes sense, especially if they're taking a lot of the stuff off your plate, or now you don't need an office or an assistant or bookkeeper, because maybe bookkeeping is bundled in there. You want to really see what's included and validate talking with the franchisees, making sure that they've been happy with the services and the support from the franchisor. Yeah, I get questions a lot, and I am not an attorney. I'll be first to admit that. And is this normal wording? Is this normal? And I always refer back to the attorneys, because there is some wording. I'm not an attorney, and I don't understand specifically what it means, or it sounds like the franchisor may not be able to. Are they competing with me? Are they not? I don't understand what this looks like. I always tell people to speak with a professional in that space. And if you disagree, this is a good conversation, because I want to make sure I understand this correctly. But when the point of reviewing this franchise disclosure document, which, by the way, for everyone listening in, if you haven't listened to past episodes, the franchise agreement is contained within the FDD. So you hear all these terms, but the franchise disclosure document is the complete document. The franchise agreement is in that document. But, people will say, well, that document really is written in stone. So why do I need a franchise attorney? It is what it is. But my understanding is, number one, You're doing it for the review, for the peace of mind in there, making sure that there aren't any red flags. And maybe even potentially, I know there's a couple questions built in here, but potentially maybe there is some type of negotiation or wiggle room.
So you can sometimes ask for changes. What specific areas in the FDD might have wiggle room? And how does a lawyer help you spot potential red flags versus standard practice? Kit reveals more next.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.